Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about events that change the world forever. And one of these events that we're talking about today happened in the 1960s. And what I'm going to make reference to is the outer planets, because the outer planets are the planets that really do create the world changes, because they really do rule the collective unconscious and therefore have their major effects on our subconscious mind and our psychology. Whereas the faster moving planets in Vedic astrology are used for the physical being and body, and the outer planets rule our subconscious psychological mind. So of course, how we think and how we feel is relative. And in the 1960s, we had one of the most profound conjunctions that affected our world and what it was all about during that time of revolution. And that was the Pluto-Uranus conjunction. Now remember, when an outer planet came into our awareness, when we discovered it, whatever that planet's about is what was relative to that time. Such as, when Pluto was discovered, we came upon atomic nuclear energy. Pluto is that explosive. When we discovered Uranus, that's when we started in on inventions. The cotton gin started using all of these new tools. So that's the inventive, creative mind. But Uranus rules change. And so you put it together, explosive change is really what the 60s were all about. And revolution, rebellion, that's what happened. I mean, it was the Vietnam War, it was a time of social rights, and it was a time of breakdown of the old traditions that needed to change. And the whole hippie movement came about during this time as rebellion against the old patterns that needed to be changed. So this was after World War II. It was time for a change. And when we look at the 60s, there were so many assassinations, and that's what we're going to talk about today, because the assassination that we're talking about today was one of the assassinations that changed the world forever. So what are we going to talk about? The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. So let's put up his chart, and as well we're going to put up the chart of the day that he was assassinated. So looking at Martin Luther King Jr.'s chart, you'll notice that his ascendant is in Aries. He's a fighter. He is a pioneer, someone that's going to start new things, and he sees things differently. And with that, Mars becomes very, very potent, because Mars is the planet that rules the ascendant. I call this the chart ruler. Notice where his Mars is. It's in the second house with Rahu. The second house is our voice, our speech. And he was out there speaking his truth. He didn't mind at all that he would be attacked. And boy, was he ever attacked. So looking also at that, what I want to point out is I want to compare this day of these changing times and when everything really was relative. And what we're going to do is we're going to plug in the transits into his chart. But before we do that, notice that he had quite a following. How do I see that? Well, we know that from history, but look at his 11th house. That's groups, organizations, and friends. And look where his Venus and his Moon are in the 11th house. He probably had a lot of female followers. And on top of that, you're going to find that Rahu and Ketu, well, with Rahu being in the second house, this is a house that's very detrimental. It's called a Marika house. But when you have Rahu in the second, you have Ketu in the 8th, which sometimes that can shorten a life. But his whole mission, maybe it wasn't totally accomplished, but boy, did he start a beautiful trend of speaking our truth and what he believed in. His words were powerful. We still quote them today. Very, very important and amazing work that he did. He also had the Sun and Mercury in his 10th house. He was a world leader. Yes, whenever the Sun is in the 10th house, you shine. And you should have your own business. You should do your own thing. You are a leader. So I want to go to where, and even Saturn, I want to go to his natal Saturn. It's in the 9th house of speaking the truth. He didn't believe in the old concepts. He broke away. Why do I say that? Because when Saturn's in the 9th, you don't want to listen to all the old rules, the old religion. You want to have your own. And makes you a little cynical about the way things are when Saturn's in the 9th. But let's plug in the planets for the day that he was assassinated on April 4th, 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. Plugging all those planets in, we have quite a combination of planets in his 12th house. If you will place all of those planets in Pisces, which together in Pisces was Rahu and Saturn on that day. They were together in Pisces. That reflects a very difficult time for the world, a wake up. And it was with the Sun. They were with, of course, I can see here Mercury and Venus. And looking at that all in the 12th house, what does that mean? It means there were hidden agendas. It means there were secrets. There was things he couldn't see coming, because the 12th house is what? Secret enemies. That was dire. And all of these planets are sitting on his natal Uranus. And actually transiting Saturn was right there at 21 degrees in his chart for that day. And Rahu was at 25 degrees of Pisces in his 12th house. But what I feel is so significant is, if you will notice also, Uranus and Saturn were opposed one another, representing another indication of major shifts and changes and sudden events that caused a breakthrough and change in government in our world. That's Uranus and Saturn. That's what was happening at that time. But the thing that I think is the most significant, that really reflects the exact day excuse me, that this all happened, was if you will look at where the transit of Pluto was. Remember, Pluto is that planet of major changes, transformational changes that changed the world forever. And Pluto on the day of the assassination was 27 degrees of Leo. I want you to plug that in, because notice it was almost exact, less than a degree away from aspecting his natal moon. That's huge. The moon is our mind. It is the most personal point in a chart. And the planet Pluto moves very, very slow. For it to hit exactly opposing that moon represents that this was the day of what? A major ending, his death. A major transformational change in consciousness and awareness. And he left his mark on the world. Because this Pluto represented so much going on, happening in the world. And I want you to know that Jupiter was very close. Jupiter was in the day of the assassination. I'm looking at where Jupiter is right there opposing Venus and Moon. Now they're not tight, but I'm just saying this was the effect that he had on the masses. And that was on the day of the assassination and days later within that year. And actually that was also the year that Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. He was assassinated in June the same year, just a few months later. And this was the Jupiter-Pluto coming together in that year that caused this major upheaval. And it was affecting so tightly the moon in Martin Luther King Jr.'s chart. So this is a day that changed the world forever. We can see it in the transits for that day, but we can also see how he was affected and how the world was affected based on where these outer planets were. So with that, I'd like to close. If you would like more information on me, or you would like to start receiving my free newsletter, go to my website, which is galacticcenter.org, or if you would like to study Vedic astrology with me, please check out my university website, which is University of Vedic Astrology.com. Thank you.